Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook continues to step in it when it comes to the future of the Federal Reserve System. You're not going to believe the arguments going back and forth in court. Lisa Cook looks to be in real trouble, and when she goes down, I suspect the Federal Reserve System is going to go down with it. Shocking turn of events. Jerome Powell cannot be happy with what's going on in court in Washington, D.C. Let's break it down when we come right back. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Dine, a proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and I'm proud to say the top voice of the Second Amendment in America. Thank you, 2025 Gundies Awards. All right, folks, so this Lisa Cook situation, one of the 7 voting members, one of the 7 voting governors of the Federal Reserve Board, if you will, is really been fired. She's been fired by President Donald Trump. Because under the statute that gives her a 14-year term, which she received her nomination and confirmation during the Joe Biden years. So Lisa Cook is in the middle of her 14-year term, serving as one of the 7 voting governors on Federal Reserve open monetary policy and whatnot. One of the 7 voting members. Lisa Cook has been fired by President Donald Trump for cause. The legal basis is pretty clear because the statute that gives her 14-year appointment has a caveat, a carve-out, that says that the president, specifically the president, can fire her and terminate her job as a governor of the Federal Reserve System for cause. It specifically says the president. It specifically says for cause. And by the way, as a side note, even if there is no for-cause basis for terminating Lisa Cook, which there is, which we'll get to in just one moment, the reality is that President Donald Trump is the head of the executive branch. He is the president, a definitive article, right? The president of the United States as set forth in Article 2 of the United States Constitution. Article 1 creates the Congress, the legislature. Article 2 creates the president. All of the power of the presidency, all the power of the executive branch shall be vested in one man, the president. In today's world, that's President Donald J. Trump. And Article 3 of the Constitution, of course, creates the Supreme Court and the judiciary. So even if Lisa Cook, in the middle of her 14-year term, did not provide the President of the United States a for-cause reason to get terminated, to fire her, which I think she's done based on the evidence here. Even if she had not done so, there's a very strong legal argument that President Trump, as the head of the executive branch, could fire her anyway, because she's like a principal officer of the United States. And the Federal Reserve System is not allowed to be a fourth branch of government, even though many people think they are, though they're not. The Constitution doesn't permit that. So Donald Trump would be able to fire her anyway as a senior official in the executive branch. No different than President Trump can fire the Attorney General. He can fire the head of DHS. He can fire the head of the FDA and so on and so on. Because these people work as senior officials in the executive branch. And who is the boss of the executive branch? The President of the United States. And today, again, that's Donald Trump. So with that said, this case is going on. It's been litigated now in D.C. in front of a judge, a typical anti-Trump judge. No shock there. Virtually the entire court system in the Washington, D.C. is full of anti-Trumpers. In fact, last I checked, there's a large percentage of them were not even born in the United States. But I digress. The point is that Lisa Cook knew exactly where to sue in this country, and she sued in Washington, D.C. Obviously a very friendly venue for her, but I don't think it's going to work. Because if you look at the legal arguments being advanced by the President of the United States, they're very powerful. And the fact is, based on the record that I can tell, even though Lisa Cook has been accused of engaging in mortgage fraud, by duping federal banks into loaning her money so she could take out a mortgage and buy multiple homes at very favorable terms on very favorable interest rates and the like, by claiming multiple homes, it turns out, were her primary residence, even though these homes were in different states. And apparently, based on the representations by the government in court, she has not denied that she did this. Instead, she's making legal technical arguments. As you know, the old saying, if the facts are in your favor, you hammer home on the facts. If the law is in your favor, You hammer home on the law. If the facts are against you, you better talk about the law. And that is exactly what the lawyers for Lisa Cook are doing. They're arguing that President Donald Trump does not have the authority to fire Lisa Cook for a cause without a series of protocols being followed, and that the Article 3 courts have every right and authority to oversee and second guess, if you will, President Donald Trump's decision to fire Lisa Cook. But I don't think it's going to fly. To begin with, the lawyers for the Department of Justice representing President Trump's position have pointed out that the Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit and the United States Supreme Court, since Donald Trump took office earlier this year, have literally and repeatedly said that people like Lisa Cook that work for the federal government are simply not entitled to get injunctive relief to reinstate them in a job. For, among other reasons, you have no property interest in a job. You have no right to a job as a general matter. And beyond that, even if you did, there's other relief you could seek, such as legal relief for, let's say, not getting paid your wages or back pay or whatnot. Nevertheless, the Department of Justice has pointed out to this judge in D.C. that Lisa Cook's request for injunctive relief for a TRO and likely a preliminary injunction cannot succeed in D.C. because the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, as well as the U.S. Supreme Court, has repeatedly said this year that requests for injunctive relief to get reinstated in your job for the federal government is a no-go zone. It doesn't work. Here's what the DOJ had to say against Lisa Cook's argument that she wants her job back. Recent decisions from the United States Supreme Court and the D.C. Circuit leave no doubt that reinstatement injunctions are improper, especially in a preliminary posture. Indeed, since January 2025, those courts have stayed no fewer than 9 injunctions purporting to reinstate federal officers removed by President Donald Trump. Instead of grappling with those orders, which, as the Supreme Court has recently reminded, are binding as to the application of the equitable factors, Dr. Lisa Cook here repeatedly cites instead the orders that were stayed and even the Supreme Court dissent. In other words, she's relying on a Supreme Court dissent. And of course, that's exactly right. And the reason why the DOJ position is right and that Lisa Cook's position is wrong to preserve her job. And by the way, we're going to talk about the effects on the monetary policy in just a moment here. But the reason why she's clearly wrong on the law is because the discretion to determine whether or not someone is a for-cause basis or there's a for-cause basis to remove someone is with the President of the United States. Not just because the statute doesn't define for-cause, which means the President can kind of, within reason, define it or determine what's for-cause, but really Lisa Cook, as a governor of the Federal Reserve System, is really a senior official for the federal government, working for the executive branch at the end of the day, and the President, under Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, has independent authority to remove, I think, governors of the Federal Reserve System, although that has not been squarely established. But I think that's the only logical thing, because obviously members of the Federal Reserve Board don't report directly to Congress and they don't report directly to the Supreme Court. So who are they reporting to in our constitutional scheme of government? They have to report to somebody. And the answer has to be they report to the President of the United States. And if you report to the President of the United States as a member of as a member of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve Board, right? Well, guess what? You're a senior official in the federal government, a principal officer of the federal government, which means the President can fire your butt under Article 2 of the Constitution. But beyond that, this is an excellent point made by the lawyers for Donald Trump against Lisa Cook, a point making this exact point, that he has the discretion to determine for cause. Here's what they have to say. The statute does not define what constitutes cause, which means the president necessarily must make a discretionary judgment in exercising this power. He assuredly needs a reason, but the sufficiency and adequacy of that reason is committed to his discretion, and as such, judicial review of the president's decision is not available. Congress has, on occasion, provided for judicial review of for-cause removal determinations, but Congress did not do so here, so the president's determinations are conclusive. So what did Federal Reserve Board Governor Lisa Cook do? Well, according to the president, she probably engaged in mortgage fraud, and there's a criminal referral about this. And not only is it just factually problematic for her, it also has a perception that does no good, because as a member of the governors, as a governor on the Federal Reserve Board, you're frankly responsible for setting interest rates, which are very important for the mortgage market. So the last thing you want is there to be any suggestion, whether it be true or not, and here it doesn't look very good for Lisa Cook. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the truth is, but it doesn't look very good on his face. But whatever it is, the perception is not a good look to have someone setting interest rates for the mortgage market arguably engaged in mortgage fraud. Here's what the DOJ had to say about Lisa Cook and the shocking facts that appear to be the case based on the allegations of the DOJ. The Federal Housing Agency referred Dr. Cook to the Justice Department for potential criminal prosecution involving mortgage fraud. As set forth in the referral, Dr. Lisa Cook entered 2 mortgage agreements for properties in different states, Michigan and Georgia, within just a few weeks of one another in the summer of 2021, less than a year before starting her service as a governor. Each of the 2 mortgage agreements included a covenant representing that the borrower, Dr. Cook, would occupy, establish, and use the property as borrower's principal residence within 60 days after the execution of the mortgage, and shall continue to occupy the property as borrower's principal residence for at least 1 year after the date of occupancy. And both agreements proceed to specify that this representation concerning borrower's occupancy, that's Lisa Cook's occupancy, of the property as her principal residence is material to the lender. As the referral letter explained, these representations are important because secondary residential mortgages are viewed as significantly riskier to lenders and thus tend to trigger higher interest rates. So did Lisa Cook deny this? Well, apparently not. Here's what DOJ had to say about what Lisa Cook did and did not do in her legal filings seeking injunctive relief to keep her job, to stop him from being fired. She doesn't want to be fired. Let's see what she said, according to DOJ. Dr. Lisa Cook has filed an 86-paragraph federal complaint and a 23-page memorandum seeking a TRO. Yet Lisa Cook has chosen not to dispute any of the facts undergirding the determination. All she offers is the conclusory claim that the accusations against her are unsubstantiated, even though the mortgage documents themselves are facially contradictory. So this is really getting embarrassing for Lisa Cook and the Federal Reserve. Remember, she is one of the seven voting members of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System that gets to vote on things like interest rate policy, raise interest rates, lower interest rates. And keep in mind, one of the big issues here politically is that in September of 2024, right before the presidential election, Jerome Powell and this Federal Reserve System, with the majority of those 7 members of the Board of Governors, right, there's seven voting members, the majority of which are not controlled by Donald Trump or were not appointed by Donald Trump as of September 2024. And in September 2024, months before the presidential election, to help out Kamala Harris, the Federal Reserve System dropped interest rates in the United States, making things cheaper, including mortgage rates and borrowing rates and everything else. And yet here we are in 2025, and Donald Trump is urging the Federal Reserve and Jerome Powell to lower interest rates again, to help the American economy, to lower our interest payments on our federal government debt. And Jerome Powell and the majority of these 7 governors who are not Trump appointees refuse to do so. So a year ago, they were dropping interest rates to help out the economy, to help out Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And today they refuse to do so because obviously they hate Donald Trump. But here's the good news, folks. This is now getting a little bit political, but not too political. As I just mentioned, there are 7 members that vote on monetary policy. Today, of the 7 voting members of the Federal Reserve Board, listen carefully, folks. One of them is Lisa Cook, who's getting fired. One of them is Jerome Powell, the chairman, who's going to be termed out in a few months. There is also a vacancy right now that is getting filled right now. So of the 7 Board of Governor members that vote on monetary policy, 2 of the 7 are Trump appointees. 2 of the 7 are Trump appointees, okay? 4 of the others are not Trump appointees. 1 is vacant. So right now, technically speaking, if you fill that vacant seat with a Trump appointee, which is going to happen, you're going to have 4 to 3. But Jerome Powell is going to get timed out and somebody else is going to replace him by Donald Trump. That's going to become from 5 to 2 to 4 to 3, and then it's going to be 4 to 3 in favor of President Trump. Right? There'll be 2 Trump appointees, plus the vacancy that he's replacing, which is 3 Trump appointees, plus replacing Jerome Powell is 4. And this is careful. You're going to really be happy about this. And replacing Jerome Powell will be the 4th Trump appointee of the 7 voting members of the Board of Governors. Then you replace Lisa Cook, who has been fired, with another Republican appointee by Donald Trump. That's 5 of the 7. Listen carefully, folks. 5 of the 7 voting governors that oversee Federal Reserve policy in the United States will be Donald Trump appointees. So again, you'll have the 2 Trump appointees already, plus the replacement for Lisa Cook, plus the replacement for Jerome Powell is 4, plus the filling of the vacant seat is 5. 5 of the 7 voting members of the Federal Reserve Board, of the 5 of the 7 governors, will be Trump appointees. Now, what did I mention in a prior video? There are 23 to 24,000 employees that work for the Federal Reserve System right now. Who decides whether or not you can fire, shrink, alter the budget, change policy, direction of the Federal Reserve? It's the Board of Governors. Do you think if there are 5 Donald Trump appointees overseeing the 7-member board of the governors overseeing the Federal Reserve System, do you think that's going to change Federal Reserve policy? Yes, I do think so. Do you think it might shrink the number of people that work for the Federal Reserve System and all the deep staters that are there screwing around with statistics, messing around with the economy? I suspect the answer is yes. So big changes are in the works at the Federal Reserve System as 5 Trump appointees are very soon likely going to take over the Federal Reserve System. And this is great news for America and very bad news for the deep state and the Federal Reserve. And bye-bye, Jerome Powell. Don't let the door hit you on the dupa on the way out. So there you have it, folks. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure you follow me on X @4boxdiner. Don't forget to subscribe both to YouTube and to Rumble. And I look forward to talking again real soon here, the 4 Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.